Good evening and welcome to my channel. My name is David Okun. Thank you for watching my videos and thank you for sharing. Thank you for supporting this channel. We have been talking about the cost of living for 6 months because the cost of living is a major crisis across the globe, and everyone is suffering from the cost of living across the globe in the developed world, in developing worlds like in Africa, in areas including the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, where there is war, and everywhere you go, people are talking about the cost of living. The cost of living is happening because people who need help don't get help from the government or from other sources like the family or friends or communities. People who have money do not help people who don't. That's why the cost of living occurs. There are crises which actually make the cost of living worse. So the cost of living, like I have said in many of the programs, videos are produced, the cost of living is an income problem. Income problem means people don't have money, people don't have resources like wealth, people cannot access food, energy, people cannot access employment, and other sources of income. People struggle to access healthcare. See, we live in a modern economy, like everything is for sale. We operate the market economy. Market economy means we sell goods and services, including food, energy, including medicine, housing. Sometimes we sell employment also, because this employment given to us is given to us from the private sector. This we talk about the private companies. When we talk about the private company, this occurs because of privatization. Privatization is a feature of capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system we use to run our worlds, to run our countries, helping people to access wealth, businesses, exchange goods and services. And this is a system we have used for many decades. And people need to understand this to familiarize themselves, because if there is a problem to do with the cost of living, then it is necessary for people to understand why the problem occurs. If you know the nature and the source of the problem, you are more likely to solve such a problem than languishing in poverty or in suffering, such as we see now with the cost of living. In the past, we used to rely on the government to help, but the government now has changed. It is reluctant to help people. We used to talk about rights. Rights, we get it in two ways. When we are rich and we are able to access, when I say rich, if you are a multimillionaire, where you don't struggle about accessing goods and services, then you have rights. If you are not a millionaire or a multimillionaire, you attain rights when the government intervene in the economy to provide public service like the healthcare, employment, social security, benefits, and also intervening in the economy to control the minimum wage, which affects income also supporting small and medium businesses and actually managing the economy to support big businesses. All these different factors and provide rights, but once the government do not provide rights, you are left with responsibility to look after yourself, which a responsibility you need to have. With such responsibility, you will need to have money, you will have to have wealth. And that's why I'm talking now about the Brexit. Brexit was when Britain left Europe, and it is relevant to the cost of living because the Brexit created a crisis. The crisis is of any sort has been responsible for the build-up of problems now culminating in the cost of living as a crisis. It's many factors. One of the factors is Brexit. That's why I'm talking about Brexit. The other factors is the war in Ukraine, COVID-19, the financial crisis of the early 2000s. As we remember all this, now these crises are mitigated when the government intervene in the economy to support people who cannot support themselves because they are not millionaires, they are not billionaires. And these are the many of the countries are not the few. The few who are multimillionaires and multi-billionaires are often able to support themselves. So I've been looking at the cost of living. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't subscribed to support it. Like I said, thank you for people who have subscribed, people who have been sharing, people who have been clicking notification bell. Please do so. This is the best way to support this channel. And also, it's really important that you leave a comment because we are best if we discuss issues. If you think there are issues needing discussing, raise it within the comment box. And like I said, we have reached to a stage now where we need to take responsibility for our lives because the government is used to take responsibility for us to provide rights of access. The government no longer is keen on supporting us to take responsibility on our behalf, which means we are now supposed to take responsibility for our lives. Otherwise, we are going to get into trouble. The cost of living is a symptom of society changing, and that's why I've been talking about the cost of living for some time now. I will continue to talk about it and link it to different aspects because you see, if we live in a systematized sort of society, everything affects everything else. So the cost of living affects so many things. And if you watch my previous video, you will see that I was talking about when Britain left Europe. Brexit means Britain has left the European Union. Britain joined the European Union previously, many years ago. If you watch the rest of my video, I talk specifically about the European Union when member states of Europe came together to form the European Union. And I also said elsewhere that the European Union is a function of globalization. Globalization is when the rest of the world are coming together to form one global country. This is the agenda. It's called the global agenda. Some people call it globalization. And the reason for the European Union is to facilitate globalization. Beginning in Europe, also the functions such as the European Union are helping to facilitate globalization occurs in these functions such as that occurs across all the continents of the world because the European Union is a continent. You have continents in Africa, America, Europe, and all the other smaller sections of the world, they are all federating. They're coming together to form a conglomeration, a bigger uh, structures. They are becoming bigger, so that it's a process of making the country bigger or biggest. When we create the global country, there's going to be only one country. Instead of having many countries, instead of having many continents, when globalization is achieved, it's going to be one country. This creates a lot of crisis in the process. There is also something to do with capitalism, which has always been the case. The nature of capitalism is that by its very nature, it concentrates wealth and power in the hands of the few. And the few uses this wealth. They use this wealth to rule. Now, the only reason to have power is to rule over other people. People who have power use it for one thing, to rule over other people. And the reason people want to rule is to maintain wealth for themselves, to provide security, financial and economic security for themselves and for their family and for their friends, and for also their allies, people who like them, people who they congregate with. And the other reason for people wanting rule is so that they can show off. When you are a ruler, you are able to show off to other people that you are better than them. People compete. That's why we talk of competition in sports, in community, in family, even siblings. Children compete with each other. I'm more good looking than you. I'm cleverer than you. I have more money. My parents love me more than you. Or we are richer. My mother is better than your mother. My father is better than your father. This is competition. It's human nature. People want to portray themselves as being better. And the best way to do that is to have wealth. If you have wealth, you can express yourself competitively. You have a competitive advantage. So these two factors are actually drivers for the desire to rule. Unfortunately, in a society, you can only rule over people. Unless you decide to rule over something else. You can rule over wild animals. We rule over animals. We use intelligence, we use technology, we use wealth to rule over wild animals, to rule over trees, to rule over everything. But unfortunately, we also decided to rule over people. And ruling over people is not nice, because you cannot rule over anyone unless you oppress them. The best way to rule over somebody is to oppress them, to make them suffer. So that's why people resist. If you try to rule over them, they resist and try to be free. And this complex actually create the cost of living, because there are people who keep wealth to themselves. There is no point giving somebody else's. If you're ruling over somebody, why should you give them wealth? People may think this is simple or simplistic, but that is the only reason people want to pile up more and more. You will never find somebody telling you they have enough. Nobody, the only thing we can have enough of is food or drink, because the practicality is such that you cannot eat more food than your body can contain. And when it comes to money and wealth, sometimes people also stock food. If you go to homes, because they are storage, like fridge and freezers, and if you go to your kitchen, you will find that there is a lot of storage. People pile up more and more and more things, even in your bedrooms, in the bathroom. There is more. There tend to be more things than you need, and this is our behavior. And we need these things. We don't really need most things. We just want it so that we can we can control wealth, so that we we are rich. We cannot get enough of anything. We want more and more and more. That's why you have billionaires and millionaires. And they still pile more and more and more money. And that's why in a system, in a structured system like capitalism, you can only have a few people who can access money and wealth. It's just impossible for everyone to access wealth because there is no equality under capitalism. There cannot any system of rule, including you name it, as long as it's a system designed to rule. Rule means you rule over people and or other things. As long as it's systematic, as long as the system is systematic to rule over other people, it will never accommodate, because to have power, only a few people can have power. That the system is rigged in that manner. It doesn't matter how much you try to deal with the system, it will always have to kick other people out. Otherwise, the system becomes, you can't rule over somebody who has the same power as you. And having power, like I said, is we use wealth to to gain power. And that's why there's the cost of living. Because if you go to multimillionaires and multi-billionaires, they are not going to give you money. And that's why the government intervenes, because we need a society. We are society. We are family. We are community. We are country. Therefore, everybody need to survive. And the government, the first thing the government takes in terms of wealth is land. And any country you go to now, you don't realize that land is the only source of wealth. Wealth does not come from anywhere else. Even if you say, things coming from the sky, like sunlight, rain, snow, wind, these are actually mechanisms to create wealth on earth. And the earth is in land, as we understand its wealth. There is nothing else in the world which is beyond land. You see, all the wealth, money, vehicles, computer comes from the land. Even the water you drink comes from the land. The house you build it on the land. The vehicles, the airplanes are operated on land. That is why the ruling class in Britain and across the globe, the first thing they take away by force or by any means, normally by force, of course, take away the land, all of it, and control it. That's why in Britain, nobody owns the land except the few. The super rich, they own the land. And if you turn on the news, you will never hear any news on the land, because they don't want you to know that the only source of land, even money, is printed from the land. Gold, diamonds, even papers, books, all these are clothing, everything comes from the land. So if the government has taken away land, like it did in Britain, in America, in the developed world, now in the developing world, they're going to take land. The reason they take land so that they can rule over the people, because that is wealth. If you talk about wealth, you're talking about land, including money, computer, just anything, medicine, food, water, air we breathe come from the land. So this is something people need to remember. Why did the government take away the land? Now the government has our land in Britain. They took away our land. We took away our wealth. We took away our money, and promised to look after us. Now the government turns around and tells us that they can't look after us because there are too many people in the world and there isn't enough wealth. But there is enough wealth. The reason there might not be wealth for everyone is that rich people have taken more than they need, and that is because they are violent, they have bad faith, and they are uneducated. They don't want they work against peace because they don't know how to work peacefully. It is violent to take away wealth and give it in the hands of the few, and the many go without wealth, and that's why there is the cost of living, and that's why I'm talking about Brexit, because Brexit is an instrument of capitalism. Capitalism gives wealth in the hands of the few, and capitalism also is an instrument of rule. It is now being Europeanized. Capitalism is Europeanized, which means capitalism is being expanded within the European Union and also is being globalized as well. So that is capitalism is expanding globally. It's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and more and powerful, more powerful. And fewer people will control this power and wealth. That is the politics of the cost of living. And that is why I'm trying to talk about Brexit, because it directly relates to the cost of living. Created the crisis, the government failed to mitigate the crisis and created the cost of living. And these events began in 2017 with 2016 in Britain. Brexit started in 2016 in Britain when a referendum was actually given by the government. A referendum was given by the government, and a vote indicated in favor of Britain leaving Europe. And the kind of people who voted, like I said in the other video, were people who are low incomes generally in the area. These are statistic demography. The way people voted, people who had less money, and people who were unemployed. In short, people who are poor, people who are really, really poor, voted to leave Europe because the government told them, if you leave Europe, your poverty is going to go away. But the government lied to the people for political reasons, and the government is wrong because it knows what it's telling the people is not true. And that's why when Britain left Europe, people are still suffering from the cost of living. They should not be suffering the cost of living having left the European Union. And there are certain type of people who really struggle to understand the complexity of Brexit, and I've discussed this in the other video. And part of the reason people were resentful because the government and maybe the media and certain people with certain interests began to tell the British people that East Europeans are coming to take away their wealth. And generally, like I said in the other video, in the manner of human nature, people don't want to associate with poor people. The East Europeans compared to West Europeans, which Britain is part of Western Europe, Western Europe are richer than Eastern Europe. So when Eastern Europeans came to the West, Western Europe, among the Eastern Europeans, among the Western Europeans, which Britain is part of, they were not really welcomed. So the government, for political reasons, exploited this attitude, this mentality, where poor people are not really wanted in a territory like Britain, to tell the people, if you get rid of Western Europeans who are actually poor, who are actually coming to take your wealth, your jobs, your homes, then you're going to be okay. That's why people voted for Brexit, but that wasn't true, because um, people who come to Britain are not many. They are not responsible for poverty, or they are not really. The government is responsible for that, but the government normally have to blame, find somebody to blame, and cause confusion for political reasons, and that is wrong. It's a poor culture. So yeah, so we looked at certain factors. People there are studies done which also indicate that people who voted leave tended to be higher in areas affected by economic decline, high rates of suicides and drug-related deaths, and austerity reforms introduced in 2010. So these factors which created poverty in certain areas. In these areas, statistically, these are the people who believe that their hardship, even including failure to access healthcare, education, and all the other things we have been talking about, the belief that this was created by the Europeans, especially the East Europeans, but generally Europeans. But also, whenever we begin to talk about foreigners, we relate to this to immigration, including poor people coming from Africa, from around the world, and the British people actually believe these people are actually coming to take away their money and their homes, their opportunities. The government sometimes also, especially the Conservative Party on the right wing of the political spectrum, tend to use these for political opportunism. And that's what has happened in Brexit, with Brexit. That's why I'm talking about it, so that people understand that yeah, Brexit was a bad thing, and it was not true, and it created a lot of problem, a lot of crisis. And according to Thomas Sumption, an economist at the London School of Economics, older and less educated voters were more likely to vote leave. A majority of white voters wanted to leave, but only 33% of Asian voters and 27% of black voters chose leave. So more white people and less black and Asian voted to leave. And older and less educated people of Britain, this is a study by um, um, this is according to someone called Thomas Sumption. He is from the Economist, and conducted a study at the London School of Economics, which is actually something you should pay attention to. Leaving the European Union received support from across the political spectrum. Um, Voting to leave the European Union was strongly associated with holding socially conservative political beliefs, opposing cosmopolitanism, and thinking life in Britain is getting worse. Polling conducted by YouGov supported these conclusions, showing that factors such as age, political party affiliation, education, and household income were the primary factors in dictating how people would vote. For example, Conservative Party voters were 61% likely to vote Leave compared to Labour Party voters who were 35% uh, likely to leave. So this was a conservative thing. Age was one of the biggest factors affecting whether someone would vote Leave, with the 64% of people over the age of 65 likely to vote Leave, whereas 18 to 24-year-olds were only 29% likely to vote Leave. So older people were more likely to vote Leave, and younger people didn't really like the idea very much. Education was another factor indicating voting likelihood. People with GCSE or lower level of education was 70% likely to vote Leave, whereas university graduates were only 32% likely to vote Leave. So like I said in the previous video, European Union is a complex topic. It's actually a technical topic. People who are less educated and people who are older, who are more conservative. Conservatism simply means people who want Britain for Britain. They don't want to mix with other foreigners, even from they don't want. They just want to be by themselves, And this is a problem within Britain and also across the globe. It's not just in Britain, but in Britain, this featured when we were facing the idea of Brexit. Household income was another important factor, with households earning less than 20%, 20,000, 62% likely to vote Leave compared to household earning 60% or more, which were only 35% likely to vote Leave. So, like I said, if you're doing well, in terms of income, in terms of wealth, if you feel life is better, you didn't bother. Like I said, people who are suffering, who are less doing less well, were actually made to believe that their hardship, their poverty is caused by foreigners, by Britain being in Europe. Some politicians even said Britain was costing European Union membership of Britain was costing the country a lot of money, and that was not true. There were major variation in geographic support for each side. Scotland and Northern Ireland both returned majority for Remain, although this had a relatively small impact on the overall results, as England has a much larger population. The North voted Remain more in the north of England and the northern part of Britain. There were also significant regional differences within England, with most of London returning a majority Remain vote alongside urban centres in northern Ireland and northern England, such as Manchester and Liverpool, which remain majority of 60% and 58% respectively. Uh, Opposite trends appeared in industrial and post-industrial areas of Northern England, with areas such as North Lincolnshire and South Tyneside both heavily supporting Leave. These are actually statistics showing how people behave during election or at referendum, how they voted at the referendum. Opinion polls found that Leave voters believed leaving the EU was more likely to bring about a better immigration system, improved border controls, a fairer welfare system, better quality of life, and the ability to control our own laws, while Remain voters believe EU membership would be better for the economy, international investment, and the UK influence in the world. These are some of the issues arising during Brexit. When people were voting, they were thinking in different ways. Polls also found that the main reason people voted Leave were the principle that decisions about the UK should be taken in the UK. I spoke about sovereignty, national sovereignty. People want to be in control of the country, and they think that being in Europe was actually undermining sovereignty, and that leaving offered the best chance for the UK to regain control over immigration and its own borders. So I talked about immigration also as being a factor affecting the European Union, the Brexit, and people think foreigners is a problem uh, when it comes to wealth, jobs, uh, employment and things like that. And people mistakenly think foreigners are the problem. The problem, foreigners are not the problem. It's the government. The main reason people voted Remain was that the risk of voting to leave the EU looked too great when it came to things like the economy, jobs, and prices. Because, like I said in the other video, Britain, the Europe is a major trading partner with Britain. So Brexit would have affected the economy, and that's why I'm actually talking about Brexit, like I said before, because it affected trade. When a trading relationship with Europe was affected, and it affected the economy. It created a crisis, economic crisis, which is one of the cause, the cause of the cost of living. Post-referendum investigations, the European Union membership referendum, an investigation into campaigns and allegation of unlawful campaigning in the 2016 EU referendum. So, like I said before, some politicians were not honest about the way they campaign. So, following the referendum, series of irregularities related to campaign spending were investigated by the Electoral Commission, which subsequently issued a large number of fines. In February 2017, the main campaign group for the Leave EU was fined 50,000 for sending marketing messages without permission. So there were problems with the voting process. In December 2017, the Electoral Commission fined two pro-EU groups, the Liberal Democrats 18,000 and Open Britain 1,250 for breaches of campaign finance rules during the referendum campaign. Different people had different attitudes to Brexit. In May 2018, the Electoral Commission fined Leave EU 70,000 for unlawfully overspending and inaccurately reporting loans from Aaron banks totaling £6 million. Smaller fines were leveled against the pro-EU campaign group Best for Our Future and two trade union donors for inaccurate reporting. In July 2018, Vote Leave was fined 61,400 61,000 for overspending, not declaring financial share with Leave, and failing to comply with investigators. In November 2017, the Electoral Commission launched a probe into claims that Russia had attempted to sway public opinion over the referendum using social media platforms such as Twitter and Facebook. In February 2019, parliamentary The Parliamentary Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee called for an inquiry into foreign influence in disinformation, funding over manipulation, and the sharing of data in the Brexit vote. In July 2020, Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament published a report which accused the UK government of actively avoiding investigating whether Russia interfered with our opinion. The report did not pass judgment over whether Russian information operations had an impact on the result. These are some of the issues associated with electoral processes. So withdrawal processes, we're looking at withdrawal from the European Union, and and when Britain invoked Article 50 of the Treaty on the European Union, the withdrawal from the European Union is governed by Article 50 of the Treaty on the European Union. It was originally drafted by Lord Carr of Kinlochard and introduced by the Treaty of Lisbon, which entered into force in 2009. The article states that any member state can withdraw in accordance with its own constitutional requirements by notifying the European Council of its intention to do so. The notification triggers a 2-year negotiation period in which the EU must negotiate and conclude an agreement with the leaving state, setting out the arrangements for its withdrawal and taking account of the framework for its future relationship with the European Union. And if no agreement is reached within 2 years, the membership ends without an agreement unless an extension is unanimously agreed among all member states, EU member states, including the withdrawing state. On the EU side, the agreement needs to be ratified by qualified majority in the European Council and by the European Parliament. These are actually complex processes within the European Union which are necessary for Brexit to take place. These are rules of law and policy and processes. The invocation of Article 50, the United Kingdom invocation of Article 50 of the Treaty on the European Union, and this also featured a letter from Theresa May invoking Article 50. The 2015 Referendum Act did not expressly require Article 50 to be invoked, but prior to the referendum, the British government said it would respect the results. When Cameron resigned following the referendum, he said that it would be for the incoming Prime Minister to invoke Article 50. These are some intricate processes. The new Prime Minister, Theresa May, said she would wait until 2017 to invoke the article in order to prepare for the negotiations. In October 2016, she said Britain would trigger Article 50 in March 2017, and in December she gained support of MPs for a timetable. In January 2017, the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom ruled in the Miller case that government could only invoke Article 50 if authorized by an act of parliament to do so. The government subsequently introduced a bill for that purpose, and it was passed into law On the 16th March as the European Union notification of the Withdrawal Act 2017. On the 29th March, Theresa May triggered Article 50 when Tim Barrow, the British ambassador to the European Union, delivered the invocation letter to European Council President Donald Tusk. This made 29 March 2019 the expected date that UK would leave the European Union. So we are looking at the general election in the UK in 2017, and in April 2017, Theresa May called a snap general election held on the 8th of June in an attempt to strengthen her hand in the negotiations. The Conservative Party, Labour, and UKIP made manifesto pledges to implement the referendum. The Labour manifesto differing in its approach to Brexit negotiations, such as unilaterally offering permanent residence to EU immigrants. So you find that the Labour Party normally tend to be more sympathetic to immigrants, but the Conservative, especially the right wing, are more hostile to immigrants. And the people of Britain are caught in this mix-up by political parties, created by political parties, both on the extreme right wing and the left wing. The Liberal Democrat Party and the Green Party manifestos propose a policy of remaining in the EU via a second referendum. The Scottish National Party (SNP) manifesto proposed a policy of waiting for the outcome of the Brexit negotiations and then holding a referendum on Scottish independence. So this is actually the Scottish National Party. Always their priority is actually to gain independence from the UK. So the results produced an expected on Parliament. The governing Conservatives gained votes and remained the largest party, but nevertheless lost seats and their majority in the House of Commons. Labour gained significantly on votes and seats, retaining its position as the second largest political party. The Liberal Democrats gained 6 seats despite a slight decrease in vote share compared with 2015. The Green Party kept its single MP while also losing national vote share. So different political parties are different fortunes. Losing votes and seats were the SNP, which lost 21 MPs, and UKIP, which suffered a minus 10.8% swing and lost its only MP. Every time you call an election, there are risks of loss and there are also opportunities of gain. The Democratic Unity Party, DUP, and Sinn Féin also made gains in votes and seats. These are political parties in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. On the 26th June 2017, Conservatives and the DUP reached a confidence and supply agreement whereby the DUP would back the Conservatives in key votes in the House of Commons over the course of the Parliament. The agreement included additional funding of £1 billion for Northern Ireland, highlighted mutual support for Brexit and national security, expressed commitment of the Good Friday Agreement, and indicated that policies such as the state pension, triple lock, and winter fuel payments would be maintained. These are actually negotiations and different mechanisms to maintain support and relationship during a crisis, such as when you don't have an overall majority in parliament. So we'll talk about UK-EU negotiations, and in 2017 and in 2018, and it's called Brexit negotiation. Prior to the negotiation, May, which was the Prime Minister of Britain, said that the British government would not seek permanent single market membership, would earn ECJ jurisdiction, which means the European Court of Justice in Europe, jurisdiction, seek a new trade agreement and free movement of people and maintain the common travel area with Ireland. These are some of the specifics involving policy after Brexit, and so the EU had adopted its negotiating directives in May and adopted Michel Barnier as chief, appointed Michel Barnier as chief negotiator. The EU wished to perform the negotiations in two phases. First, the UK would agree to a financial commitment to a lifelong benefit for EU citizens in Britain, and then negotiations on the future relationship could begin. In the first phase, the member states would demand that the UK pay a divorce bill initially estimated it's amounting to 52 billion. This is some of the terminology created during Brexit. Divorce bills actually is damages you pay because Britain would be construed as having been in breach of the contract. So the cost of that was actually the cost of Brexit. You pay because you enter into a relationship, and if you break the terms, and also the content, the basis, the basis. If you renege on that relationship, it costs money. So it costs 52 billion pounds to the UK. It's a lot of money. The EU negotiators said that an agreement must be reached between the UK and the EU by October 2018. Negotiation commenced on the 19th of June 2017. Negotiating groups were established for three topics: the rights of EU citizens living in Britain and vice versa, Britain's outstanding financial obligations to the EU, and the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. In December 2017, a partial agreement was reached. It ensured that there would be no hard border in Ireland, protected the rights of the UK citizens in the EU and of EU citizens in Britain, and estimated the financial settlement to be 35 to 39 billion pounds. May who was actually the Prime Minister, Prime Minister May, stressed that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Following this partial agreement, EU leaders agreed to move on to the second phase in the negotiation discussion of the future relationship, a transition period, and a possible trade deal. In March 2018, a 21-month transition period and the terms for it were provisionally agreed. In June 2018, Irish Taoiseach Leo Varadkar said that there had been little progress on the Irish border questions on which the European Union proposed a backstop to come into effect if no overall trade deal had been reached by the end of the transition period. and that it was unlikely that there would be a solution before October, when the whole deal was to be agreed. In July 2018, the British government published the Chequers Plan, containing its aims for the future relationship that was to be determined in the negotiations. The plan sought to keep British access to the single market for goods, but not necessarily for services, while allowing for an independent trade policy. The plan calls cabinet resignations, including those of Brexit Secretary David Davis and Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. Theresa May's agreement and failed ratification, and in 2018, the 2018 draft withdrawal agreement on the 13th of November 2018, the UK and EU negotiators agreed the text of a draft withdrawal agreement, and Prime Minister May secured our cabinet's backing of the deal the following day, though Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab resigned over fatal flaws in the agreement. It was expected that ratification in the British Parliament would be difficult. On the 25th November, all 27 leaders of the remaining European Union countries endorsed the agreement. On the 10th of December 2018, the Prime Minister postponed the vote in the House of Commons on our Brexit deal. This came minutes after the Prime Minister's office confirmed the vote would be going ahead. Faced with the prospect of a defeat in the House of Commons, this option gave May more time to negotiate with conservative backbenchers, and the European Union, even though they had ruled out further discussions. The decision was met with calls from many Welsh Labour MPs for a motion of no confidence in the government. Also, on the 10th December 2018, the European Court of Justice, ECJ, ruled that the UK could unilaterally revoke its notification of withdrawal as long as it was still a member and had not agreed with a withdrawal agreement. The decision to do so should be unequivocal and unconditional and follow a democratic process. If the British revoked their notification, they would remain a member of the European Union under their current membership terms. The case was launched by Scottish politicians and referred to the ECJ by the Scottish Court of Session. The European Research Group, ERG, a research support group of Eurosceptic conservative MPs, opposed the Prime Minister's proposed withdrawal agreement treaty. Eurosceptics are people who are not interested in Britain being member of the European Union. So they have their own research infrastructure. Its members objected strongly to the withdrawal agreement's inclusion of the Irish backstop. Irish backstop involved border relationship between the north and the south of Ireland. The south of Ireland would still remain in Europe, and the north would be out. The north being part of the UK. Its members objected strongly to the withdrawal agreement inclusion of the Irish backstop. The ERG members also objected to the proposed 39 billion, 39 billion pounds financial settlement with the EU, and stated that the agreement would result in the UK's agreement to continue to continuing to follow EU regulations in major policy areas, and to the continuing jurisdiction of the ECJ, that is the legal the court system of the European Union, the European Court of Justice, over interpretation of the agreement and of European law still applicable to the UK. On the 15th January 2019, the House of Commons voted 432 to 202 against the deal, which was the largest majority ever against a United Kingdom government. Soon after, a motion of no confidence in Her Majesty's government was tabled by the opposition, which was rejected by 325 votes to 306. This was the politics of Westminster, as triggered by the issue of Brexit. On the 24th of February, Prime Minister May proposed that the next vote on the withdrawal agreement would be on the 12th March 2019, 17 days away from the Brexit date. On the 12th March, the proposal was defeated by 391 votes to 242, a loss of 149 votes, down from 230 from when the deal had been proposed in January. On the 18th of March 2019, the Speaker informed the House of Commons that a third meaningful vote could be held only on a motion that was significantly different from the previous one, citing parliamentary precedents going back to 1604. The withdrawal agreement was brought back to the House of Commons without the attached understanding on the 29th of March. The government's motion of support for the withdrawal agreement was defeated by 344 votes to 286, a loss by 58 votes, down from 149 when the deal had been proposed on the 12th of March. So we'll talk about Article 50 extension and Johnson's agreement. On the 20th of March 2019, the Prime Minister wrote to the European Council President Tusk requesting that Brexit be postponed until the 30th of June 2019. On the 21st March 2019, May presented our case to a European Council summit meeting in Brussels. After May left the meeting, a discussion amongst the remaining European Union leaders resulted in the rejection of the 30th June date and offered instead a choice of two new alternative Brexit dates. On the 22nd of March 2019, the extension options were agreed between the British government and the European Council. The first alternative offered was that if MPs rejected May's deal in the next week, Brexit would be due to occur by the 12th April 2019 with or without a deal, or alternatively another extension be asked for and a commitment to participate in the 2019 European Parliament election given. The second alternative offered was that if MPs approved May's deal, Brexit would be due to occur on the 22nd May 2019. The later date was the day before the start of the European elections. So you can see um, the numbers of issues raised as part of Brexit. After the government deemed unwarranted the concerns over the legality of the proposed change because it contained two possible exit dates the previous day. On the 27th March 2019, both the Lords without a vote and the Commons by 441 to 105 votes approved a statutory instrument changing the exit date to the 22nd of May 2019 if a withdrawal deal is approved, or the 12th April 2019 if it is not approved. The amendment was then signed into law at 12:40 p.m. the next day. Following the failure of the British Parliament to approve the withdrawal agreement by the 29th of March, the UK was required to leave the European Union on the 12th April 2019. On the 10th of April 2019, late-night talks in Brussels resulted in a further extension to the 31st of October 2019. Theresa May again requested an extension only until 30th of June. Under the terms of this extension, if the withdrawal agreement were to be passed before October, Brexit would occur on the first day of the subsequent month. The UK would then be obligated to hold European Parliament election in May to leave the EU on the 1st June without a deal. In granting the Article 50 extension, the EU adopted a stance of refusing to reopen, that is, to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement. After Boris Johnson became Prime Minister on the 24th of July 2019 and met with EU leaders, the EU changed its stance. On the 17th October 2019, following tunnel talk between UK and the EU, a revised withdrawal agreement was agreed on a negotiation level and endorsed by the British government and the EU Commission. The revised deal contained a Northern Ireland protocol as well as a technical modification to related articles. In addition, the political declaration was also revised. The revised deal and the political declaration was endorsed by the European Council later that day. To come into effect, it needed to be ratified by the European Parliament and the Parliament of the United Kingdom. The British Parliament passed the European Union Withdrawal Number 2 Act in 2019, which received royal assent on the 9th September 2019, obliging the Prime Minister to seek a third extension if no agreement has been reached at the next European Council meeting in October 2019. In order for such an extension to be granted, if it is requested by the Prime Minister, it would be necessary for there to be unanimous agreement by all eight of the EU governments. On the 28th October 2019, the third extension was agreed by the EU with a new withdrawal deadline on the 31st of January 2020. Exit day in British law was then amended to this new date by statutory instrument on the 30th of October 2019. And we talk about 2019 UK general election taking place at that time. And after Johnson was unable to induce Parliament to approve a revised version of the withdrawal agreement by the end of October, he chose to call for a snap election. Due to the fact, three motions for an early general election under the Fixed Term Parliaments Act 2011 failed to achieve the necessary two-thirds supermajority for it to pass. So instead, in order to circumvent the existing law, the government introduced an election bill which only needed a simple majority of MPs to vote in favor into the House of Commons, which was passed by 438 to 20, setting the election date for Thursday, the 12th of December. Opinion polls up to polling day showed a firm lead for the Conservatives against Labour throughout the campaign. In the run-up to the general election on the 12th of December 2019, the Conservative Party pledged to leave the European Union with the withdrawal agreement negotiated in October 2019. Labour promised to renegotiate the aforementioned deal and hold a referendum, letting voters choose between the renegotiated deal and remain. The Liberal Democrats vowed to revoke Article 50, while the SNP intended to hold a second referendum, however, revoking Article 50 if the alternative was a no-deal exit. The DUP supported Brexit but would seek to change parts related to Northern Ireland it was dissatisfied with. Plaid Cymru and the Green Party backed a second referendum believing the UK should stay in the European Union. The Brexit Party was the only major party running for election which wanted the UK to leave the European Union without a deal. The election produced a decisive result for Boris Johnson, with the Conservatives winning 365 seats, gaining 47 seats, and an overall majority of 80 seats, with Labour suffering their worst election defeat since 1935 and losing 60 seats to leave them with 202 seats and only a single seat in Scotland. The Liberal Democrats won just 11 seats, with their leader Jo Swinson losing 1 seat. The Scottish National Party won 11 seats with their leader Jo Swinson. The Scottish National Party won 48 seats after gaining 14 seats in Scotland. These are different political parties operating in the UK and the result of the national election in 2019. The result broke the deadlock in the UK Parliament and ended the possibility of a referendum being held on the withdrawal agreement, and ensured that the United Kingdom would leave the European Union on the 31st of January in 2020. So you talk about ratification and departure. Foreign and Commonwealth Office illuminated in the colours of the European Union Jack on the 31st of January 2020. Subsequently, the government introduced a bill to ratify the withdrawal agreement. It passed its second reading in the House of Commons in a 358 to 234 votes on the 20th of December 2019 and became law on the 23rd January 2020 as the European Withdrawal The European Union Withdrawal Agreement Act 2020. The withdrawal agreement received the backing of the Constitutional Committee in the European Parliament on the 23rd January 2020, setting expectation that the entire Parliament would approve it in a later vote. On the following day, Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel signed the withdrawal agreement in Brussels, and it was sent to London where Boris Johnson signed it. The European Parliament gave its consent to ratification on the 29th by 621 votes to 49 votes. Immediately after voting approval, members of the European Parliament joined hands and sang Auld Lang Syne. The Council of the European Union concluded European Union's ratification the following day at 11 p.m. GMT, 31st January 2020. The United Kingdom's membership of the European Union ended 47 years after it had joined. Thank you for watching this video, and thank you for subscribing. If you have subscribed, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. Been going through this material regarding when Britain left the European Union, and I was trying to describe the events involving Brexit, but the relevance of this material in terms of the cost of living is that the process, as complex as it was, actually unnecessary and extremely problematic for Britain, created the cost of living as a crisis we know today. So our intention is that to look at this thing and take this opportunity for people to understand the relationship between Brexit and the cost of living. The cost of living is the purpose for this material, so that people, when the government tells them the reason for the cost of living, they should not leave out Brexit. Brexit was a fundamental aspect of the cost of living. Brexit, like I said at the opening of this video, is an expansion of capitalism within the European Union hemisphere. And this is a feature of globalization, which is actually also the expansion of capitalism across the globe. And capitalism, wherever it operates as an economic system, tends to take wealth away from the hands of the many and gives it to the hands of the few. This creates the cost of living, and especially the cost of living as a global crisis. And that's why I'm talking about it. And because at the moment, I believe that the cost of living is affecting so many people, and it's a serious topic, and people should really take note of it. If you have watched up to this time, then you are a really committed disciple of the cost of living and also of the European Union, because it's a very complex topic, but it is important for people to really pay attention to it, because you have to take responsibility for your life, in the sense that the government no longer want to take responsibility for you, and that is why it is no longer intervening in the economy. Even if the government spend money on the public sector, the money actually goes to enrich the rich, because the system is rigged in favor of the rich. The only way to run the public sector is to actually, for the government to run it themselves. The government should not send private companies to run the public service. They should run public service themselves. But now, the government is pouring money to private companies, which actually spend this money on infrastructure, on capital investment. This money is spent on capital investment, and the money spent on infrastructure are wealth given to wealth owned by private companies. This private company owning wealth and actually using public money to support their business is wrong because people do not know about it. And taxpayers' money is being given freely to private companies. And I think the British people should be aware about this. Every time the government tells you anything else, tell them the problem of public services failure to fund frontline service. Because frontline services, when you phone the hospital and speak to a doctor, if you go to your clinic, you can see a clinician, you can see your doctor all the times. Now, this is not happening because there are no doctors. Because the NHS, the National Health Service, has been privatized. Now, the instinct of private companies is to maximize profit. That means the private companies tend to promote a concept of efficiency saving. Efficiency saving means using money wisely, and that also means cutting costs. So sometimes the government talk of cutting waste. That relates to private system, private sector system. It doesn't relate to public service because public service there is nothing like waste. I mean, if you spend money on people who need it, you're not wasting that money. Waste means you are spending money on a business which doesn't make profit. That's the meaning of waste. That's the meaning of efficiency saving. It's a private sector, it's a private business concept. It has nothing to do with public service. Public service, there is nothing like efficiency saving. There is nothing like wasting taxpayers' money. When you say public taxpayers' money is being wasted, you're actually telling us because taxes are paid by people who have money. Mainly, the people who pay money to finance public sector are actually the rich. Although the government also tax people who work, but most people who work shouldn't be taxed. Because once you begin to tax people who work for a living, you make them poor. Poverty is wrong. And poverty, being in poverty, doesn't mean that getting out of poverty doesn't mean you're going to be rich. And if you say you're not in poverty, it doesn't mean you are rich. Rich people do not experience poverty. They don't experience the cost of living. And poor people are poor. There are middle class who are not poor. They are not even rich. But the risk with the middle class is that when there's a crisis, they become poor. They begin to struggle financially. That's poverty. When you struggle financially to buy the basic necessity, that is poverty. But people who may earn 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, if they lose their livelihood, they lose a job, or they lose part of their savings, they are so vulnerable. I mean, they can be poor within 6 months, coming from the middle class. That's why I say the majority of the population are either poor or potentially poor. And these are the people government should pay attention to, especially the people at the lower scale of society suffering the most when there is a crisis like the cost of living, where the government should really pay more attention so that a lot of people don't suffer. Because now, if you phone the hospital, you can't get a doctor because the doctors are not there. The hospitals are not employing doctors because it costs money. So, in order to make profit, they cut costs. That is how private companies make money. They cut costs. If a project is unprofitable and public services are not for profit, which means if the government sends a private body to provide public service, it will not work, because private companies only work for profit. They will not spend money at all on anything if they're going to make loss, or if they're not going to make the amount of profit they want. That is the nature of the private sector. The government understands that. The government knows that. The government should tell the people of Britain the truth, that private companies cannot provide public service. It doesn't matter how much money the government gives to the private companies. And people also think private companies are using their money. No, they are using government money. They are using taxpayers' money. But they not only use taxpayers' money to provide public services. They don't provide public service because they keep the money to themselves, because they want to maximize profit. Profit maximization means greedy. Being greedy is greed. See, they are greedy for wealth. How can the government give a greedy organization, which is the private business, somebody who is so greedy, they cannot have enough money? It's human nature. That's why the government should use a different system to mitigate against a system of justice and fairness, so that to deal with the human greed found in the private sector, because the private sector are free. Public sector is regulated by the law. They operate under the law. Freedom means you operate above. You don't. There is no law against you. That's why the word regulation does not apply to private companies. If you ask a conservative or even a new Labour MP their attitude to regulating private companies, they don't. Regulation means the private company have to function within the law. Deregulation means they are free to function outside the law. They set their own laws for themselves, which is no law at all. So they're free. In other words, if you want to be free, don't obey the law. Private companies do not obey the law. That's why they are free. The market do not obey the law. That's why they are free. There's free market, which is actually the essence of business system, commercial system. They are free. They are not regulated. Regulation means the law. They are making private companies or public companies operate within the law is called regulation. Ask any MP, ask anybody, the characteristic of a private business. They are not regulated. And that is a problem, because they do as they like. They are not even accountable, even if they are using public money. They could only be spending 10% of what the government gives on public service. The rest of the money, they are going to invest it in capital. They are going to invest it in infrastructure. That is their wealth. In other words, the government, the UK government, especially big businesses, they are giving billions of public money for free to private companies. And this is difficult to understand. And when you ask the politicians, especially the conservative, they are going to tell you something you don't even understand. And that's why the British people are so confused. The government tells them, we are spending billions on public service. Yes, you are. But the money is not being spent on public service. It's being spent on creating wealth for the super rich. That is the problem with private company providing public service, because they get the money from the government. They don't spend their own money. And when you ask politicians or you ask some people about providing public service, then they ask you, where will you get the money? Where will you get the money to provide public service? The question is, you get the money from the government. The government is supposed to tax people who have money, like the billionaires and millionaires, or borrow money. When you tax and borrow, The money comes from the super rich. It comes from the poor by mistake. It should not come from poor people because poor people don't have money. It should not come from the middle people, the middle earners. Middle income earners should pay less tax. Poor people, people on minimum wage, people on if you earn 20,000, you shouldn't pay tax at all because you are actually poor. You may not realize it as long as you cannot buy a house outright. Because in a house costs in London, for example, a house costs 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, depending on the area. On average, it's about 200,000 pounds. Nobody who is actually on low income, nobody get paid even 50,000. People don't even get paid 30,000 pounds per annum. This is before tax. How are you going to buy a house? If you cannot buy a house, then you're poor. This is what I've been telling everyone on this channel, and I'll be continuing with exploring the European Union because it relates to capitalism. Capitalism relates to income, income inequality, the requirement for income distribution by the state, and that's why income redistribution is why the government should intervene in the economy, either to regulate the private company which is using public money to provide public service, regulation or nationalization, which means deprivatizing the companies which provide public service, taking it back into public ownership so that it provide public service more effectively. Those are the two problems. The first is privatizing public service. The second is if you privatize it, regulate it. If you don't even regulate it, they operate outside the law. They are free. They are not accountable. We don't know what they are doing with public money. Because if you regulate it, then they are accountable. You ask them how they're spending the money. Now, the government has allowed private companies, especially wealthy private companies, to do whatever they like. They give public money, and these companies don't give account because they are not regulated. Thank you for watching this video. Leave a comment below. Subscribe to the channel. Share with family and friends. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you. Bye. See you in the next one.